I grew up in Houston, Texas. After college, I graduated from college in 2007. I hadn't worked for very long in corporate America, and it was not a great experience. So I was very driven to go on my own and figure out the next chapter for myself. I looked at different properties to invest in, starting with houses and then small retail, where the city was expanding the light rail on the east side of town of Houston. And I was just fortunate to have a very lucky happy hour with someone who was experiencing a lot of tough times in the apartment business. He said that I should be looking at larger apartment complexes. At that time, I changed my focus and acquired my first property in Baytown, Texas.
Was it a risky endeavor because of the nature of the community at the time?
No one wanted to buy apartments in Baytown in 2010. One of the big items that somewhat got me focused on this idea of building community was that there was no exterior lighting at the property. And so when the winter months would come, we'd have to close the office at 4 p.m. because the staff didn't feel safe, leaving in pitch black.
Right.
I remember walking around the property with the lighting guide just to make sure that areas were sufficiently well lit. And there was a few kids riding their bikes, and I was like, these kids couldn't have ridden their bikes before these lights were up, right? And so in a sense, you've added to their lives, you've impacted their lives, and just kind of seeing how that happens has always stuck with me, and that's part of what we do.
You're in the Houston market and you're in other markets. How do they compare in terms of affordability and how you guys maintain that level of affordability?
I think that one of the challenges in Texas is property taxes. If you go to other markets, Phoenix, Arizona, Georgia, property taxes are based on only a percentage of the value. And in exchange, they take up a lot lower expense. The thing with property taxes in Texas is that they're very hard to predict. This has happened in a few assets, but on one in particular, in 2018, the property was at $46 million on HCAD. At 2019, it was at $64 million. In 2020, it was $77. Wow. We have not settled 2019 or 2020, yet they've increased them and we have to pay them. To go from 44 to 70, you're not able to increase the rents, right, to match that.
You're always seeing these property tax fights on the local level, whether it's a city or county, but they never talk about renters. A lot of times renters do kind of, shift the blame to the landlords or the property managers when the blame should be shifted to their local governments that are increasing the appraisals or the property taxes.
You're 100% right. It's an unfortunate thing for Texas because I think in general, the way that I was able to start my company, and there's so many stories like mine, I always tell people I couldn't have started my company in New York City. It would have been impossible, right? It happened because it's Houston, it's because it's Texas, and it's the land of entrepreneurship. Sometimes the problem with the property tax system, they have set limits that they can reduce at the ARB meetings. They have set limits they can reduce at mediation. Before you even go through the process, you say, oh, well, they put me at 77, I can get down to 70. But that's it. I think the beauty of Texas and the beauty of Houston specifically is housing affordability, right? At the end of the day, to go and start your career buying an apartment complex for, say, $40,000 a unit, well, that doesn't exist in New York City. But Houston, in general, is so spread out and sprawling and growing demographically that you can go into a neighborhood and either buy or build something, revitalize it, create a community, and really create a lot of value for yourself and for the residents. Which is what the goal is.
So what do you see the future of multifamily housing? We've been hearing a lot of reports during COVID of people leaving cities and fleeing cities and rental rates dropping and things like that.
I read a book called America 2050, The Next 100 Million Americans. And it talks about it. In 2050, there'll be 400 million people, and we're still growing demographically. And so I think there continues to be demand. It doesn't really solve the affordability issue. That's a much more complex issue. One of the frustrations that I've had with current affordability voucher program is that renters are not able to supplement their voucher. But if you could give the vouchers to more people and say, this is going to pay $500 of your rent, and you can supplement the other $500, or you could supplement the other, whatever it was. I think that's a solution. I think that it's a little bit, look, there are people who need to live in certain neighborhoods, whether it's the firefighters, the teachers, who can't afford to live where they work. If we're able to do it that way, that'd be great, and it would give people ownership in that process a little bit by having to contribute their own capital.
What would you say is kind of the biggest impediment to affordable housing in terms of just building affordable housing that people, like you said, teachers, firefighters, folks who work for the city, folks who work for the county can afford to live inside of the city or the county? What do you think is the biggest impediment that folks like you and others are facing from filling that need?
If you look at the housing stock of Houston, there's a ton of housing in the B and C properties. It's one thing in New York City or San Francisco where there's this huge demand for housing, right? In Houston, we have an incredible swath of rent ranges and in locations. You know, we have properties that rent for less than $1,000 a unit next to Memorial Park. It's amazing.
Right.
It's multi-million-dollar houses all around you. You know, so
you won't find that next to Central Park.
No, not at all. And I guess that kind of just speaks to affordability in general. Right. So, you know, if we're able to do that in a for-profit way, is there a lot of value to either building an affordable housing project there, which would be extraordinarily expensive with the government regulations involved in building affordable housing, or doing a PFC where you remove the property forever off the tax roll? I mean, either of those just doesn't seem to be necessarily creating a rent level that's much higher than ours.
Right.